absolutely wild as Vern Gagne's all-star wrestling goes coast to coast and continent to continent. The greatest wrestlers in the world.
He may be an apprentice carpenter, but I guarantee you he is a seasoned ring veteran.
I've been hit with bar stools, bar rags, barmaids.
I'm talking to you.
They're scared that Hulkamania's still running wild. Oh, yeah. I got a big fat wife and 9 kids at home, and I gotta feed them.
And take a look at Jesse the Body in real life.
Open your hand once if you would.
You want to see it?
This is absolutely unbelievable. Totally, completely out of control.
He's coming in over the top. Hey! Look out!
Howdy, everybody. Welcome in to AWA Unleashed. It's a special bonus edition to end 2025. You know me, Tubbsy, right there. You also know Polish Joe. He's right there. You see Slick Mick. He's right there. And guys, we were not going to be back until 2026 because I still have a funeral. I got things I have to do in the first week of January. But for those that have followed the Pinfall membership, we're going to cut the bullshit. For those that have followed the Pinfall membership, the last Back to Ringside, I told you that I was a big fan of ECW. That was my favorite promotion because when I was a college student.
The AWA, of course.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, AWA, of course. But when I was telling you that there was a promotion that I enjoyed watching when I was a young man, I was the target demographic for a promotion out of Philadelphia called ECW. And I've told mixed stories, and I'll tell you guys a story here as well in a little bit. But we have maybe the highlight of ECW for me. Like I'm incredibly excited for this. I'm holding back my excitement here, guys. I didn't even let you talk yet. It's been 2.5 minutes. I've been talking. That's how excited I am.
Bring him on. Let's get to him.
Well, here he is, the quintessential stud muffin. I'm not going to do the limerick because I think that might be gimmick infringement. The one and only.
Well, a man who needs no introduction. It is I, the lyrical miracle. The sex.
Wow. Oh,
The
chills.
cunning linguist. And the quintessential stud muffin, Joel. I was giving it to this one neighbor chick so good she didn't know whether it was January, February, or March. And then I had to stop. But it was to do AWA Unleashed with the boys and Mick Karch.
Wow. Damn. Wow.
Whew.
Shit.
That was good.
Get that check written up, Chris. Bounce it over to him.
I can bounce that. Man, Joel, welcome to the podcast, my dude. Like this is a huge honor, man. And I'm glad that we could make this work because your limericks and your rhymes are just so creative. So thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me half a square. I think it's because I'm in portrait instead of landscape. I'm not sure. Maybe it's because I'm half Polish Joe. As you can tell by looking at him, all Polish. So he gets a full Polish Joe. Here, I got something for you, Polish Joe. I got a special. I didn't know you were going to be here. But now that you're here, Roddy Piper and Ivan Putski did a classic Piper's Pit. It started out like this. Let's see if you can keep up. Hey, Polish Joe, you want to hear a Polish joke?
Jestem Polako.
So the movies. You're Polish? All right, do me a favor, though. Say it in English for the plebeians in the back row. Polish Joe, I got a Polish joke.
I'm Polish.
That's all right. I'll tell it to you real slow.
Wow.
Oh.
Well, I think we can wrap her up right about there, guys. And,
No, let's keep it
oh,
rolling.
I love it. I love it. They can talk about the Bobby Heenans of the world and the Jim Cornettes and Paul Heyman. I'm going to tell you something, pal. You when you came out, and I was at a ECW show, I believe, someplace on the University of Minnesota campus several years ago, and we have a very ritzy suburb here, Edina.
Yep.
And you came out and you gave some limerick about being in somebody's vagina in Edina, and to me that is the stuff of legend. That really, look at him right there. That was just from that point on. I was a huge Joe Gertner fan. Vagina in Edina, that's enough right there.
Yes, I banged a girl named Erica in the parking lot at the Mall of America.
God, this is going to be wonderful. Easy question for you: how the hell did you wind up getting into the wrestling business? Who trained you? Who brought you in? Were you a lifelong wrestling fan? What's the scoop?
Yeah, lifelong wrestling fan since the age of. What's funny is because I was a tape trader, I was always watching it forward and backward at the same time. When I got into it, Coliseum Video had just started, so I was watching it forward and backward at the same time. I was watching it episodically, and I was also watching stuff from the 70s. And as such, it's tough for me to pinpoint how long I've been watching and when I started watching. I've tried to go to like History of WWF or WWE, Graham Coffin, and I've tried to pinpoint it, and I can't really exactly. I think I was around 8 or 9. I think it was 83 or 84. It was around the same time. Could have been closer to 85, maybe. It was around the same time, I guess, that a lot of people in Brooklyn, New York, my age, were starting to watch because it was catching fire and the nationalization and everything else. So it was around that time. It was, I'd love to say early 80s, but it was probably closer to the mid 80s. But like I say, thanks to the joys of VHS, I was able to get caught up on everything. Some of my favorite stuff to watch is 1980. I love watching championship wrestling from 1980, stuff like that, which unfortunately I think is going to be going the way of the dodo bird as far as Peacock goes. But I used to love watching that stuff. But yeah, lifelong for the most part wrestling fan.
Did you ever use RF video at all when you were trading as well, Joel?
Oh, Chris.
I did here and there. We were rivals of sorts, friendly rivals. We were kind of compatriots. There was a time where both of us were the 2 videotape services that were advertising in the Pro Wrestling Torch out of your neck of the woods. They would run RF video ads, and they would run ads for Wrestling Videotape Express. So yeah, I did. So I was a lifelong wrestling fan, and I started getting The Observer, and I started getting Georgianne Macropolis's Wrestling Chatterbox out of around here, New York City, and I found a gym in the Chatterbox. They talked about a gym. It wasn't Johnny Rods' gym at Gleason's, but it was a gym that was located like in the lobby level of the Projects on the Lower East Side. It was the Lower East Side Wrestling Gym, and Pete Marquez was there. Pete McKay. I'm sorry, Pete McKay, Gran Herena, Bobby Bold Eagle. So yeah, I kind of, I'd love to say I trained there. I'm self-trained, ish. No, I can't take full credit for being self-trained. That might be a stretch, but, I'm kind of, like an autodidact. I'm kind of taught by what I've seen. I'm kind of a student and studied the videotape and watched all the guys that you talked about up front. Your Bobby Heenans and your Jim Cornettes and your Freddie Blassie, your Johnny Valiant, and all of them. So yeah, just been in it forever. When I was 16, started going to that wrestling school, and everything just snowballed. One step leads to another.
You made it. Yeah, I gotta just ask you, you mentioned Bobby Bold Eagle. Is that Bob Boyer? Was that the Bob Boyer, Bobby Bold Eagle? He had wrestled as Bob Boyer here, and then he went to Indianapolis. He was in that area, or is this a different guy?
I don't think so. I think it's a different guy who
Okay.
worked Japan as Black Tiger for a while.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, he's a different guy. I think he was more he got over a lot international.
Okay.
He wasn't. I don't think he was a territory guy out near you.
Yeah, and the eras too. It kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
Before Joe asks his question, you talked about, you mentioned the Blassies and the Albanos, Grand Wizards, what have you. And you can put yourself into that mix, but damn it, that managerial role is a lost art in the business. I mean, now you've got advocates, Paul included, advocates and oracles and everything else. But the manager who became physically involved in the matches and was such an integral part of everything, it's a lost art, man. I really miss that.
There are fewer managers, and it is a shame. I would love to. I would love to go toe to toe with my mentor Paul, and I would love to, hopefully one day. I'm still young in the fact that I'm a non-athlete. Crash test dummy sometimes, I guess, in the past. I've certainly taken my share of defense, been on, but I'm a non-athlete in the sense that I'm not out there doing what those guys do physically. So the same way Paul's able to still do it, past his 60th birthday, is the same way I know that I'm still able to be relevant and charismatic and have presence and be able to be an asset past my 50th birthday. So I'd love to get the chance to do that. But it is a bit of a lost art. He is kind of pretty much the only game in town right now when it comes to performing and exhibiting it. And he's great, obviously. There could be more, but I guess it's just it is what it is.
Yeah, nobody's going to confuse Paul for a professional athlete either, with all due respect to Paul. Joel, I want to ask you, how did you come up with the whole limerick gimmick?
It's another thing that evolved. It was kind of a work in progress. It was kind of, episodic, and it built upon itself. I mean, like everything else, my gear was the same way. One day it was super hot in a silo that we were working in Pennsylvania, and I made the ask. I went over to Todd Gordon. I said, that Chippendale skit on SNL where like Chris Farley's out there with Patrick Swayze? I was like, think that, and like maybe what I could do is, instead of wearing, this full suit, like a white shirt with the black jacket and the red bow tie or whatever, think about maybe would I get some heat if I ditched the shirt, which I was doing half selfishly because it was 120 degrees with no air. Like, yeah, man, that sounds fun. Go for it. So I did that kind of. Then once I took total elimination of the first pay-per-view, the neck brace came along. So it was piece by piece. It was like Mr. Potato Head. And that's kind of like how the limericks started. I did one really short one to start. I just thought, I don't even know if I cleared it first. I just said, I took it from, I remembered reading it in a joke book, like gross jokes or truly tasteless jokes. Back in the 80s, they used to come out with like Truly Tasteless Volume 5, Truly Tasteless Jokes Volume 7. So like I and of course, when I was 10 years old, I had these. I also had a Rubik's Cube that I never touched because I was so much of a numbers guy that like Rubik's Cube freaked me out with the geometry and everything of it all. Love logic, love numbers. Never was into trying to do Rubik's Cube. But because I was born in 75 and because they came out in the early to mid 80s, had an original Rubik's Cube. And so I remembered from the joke book that there was this joke, how is a penis like Rubik's Cube? The more you play with it, the harder it gets. But I had stuck out as something I should say in my wrestling spiel, but I'm doing my thing, and I was like, just like Rubik's Cube, the more you play with it, the harder it gets. Just the one line, no paragraphs, no stanzas, just a quip, and it got over, and I kept doing it, and I had to keep up with myself because there were times where we'd be doing a pay-per-view and I wouldn't have one written in advance, so I'd write one. And now here it is, like, I don't know, 16 lines, 32 lines, and I come up with it half an hour before I go out there. And now I've got to memorize the thing because we're doing it live and you only get one take. So I'm trying to memorize the key words and, like, but I mean, but it's still a blessing. I mean, gosh, man, the times we had, it was, it was a joy just to be able to, I always wanted to be, Bobby Heenan, Jim Cornette, Paul, Jimmy Hart, Lou Albano. I always wanted to be all these guys. I also always wanted to be Howard Finkel. And along the way, I got my chance to do all of these things that as a youngster, I only dreamed about.
Love it. Love it. You're a man after my own heart, buddy. Everything that you're saying, you follow that dream, and little by little, everything, kind of falls into place along the way. I think that's great. Got a quick question. Go ahead, Chris.
I wanted to ask, just kind of on top of that, Joel, adding the quintessential stud muffin to it, just to kind of put the cherry on top of the sundae. Like, where did the quintessential stud muffin, and then to follow up with that, also the little Gertner dance where you put your arms like that, like, I don't know, there are things that I remember about you. Yes, the Joel Gertner dance. Yes. I like everything about the gimmick just popped me. Like, the more absurd it got, like the more it got over with me and my buddies. So how do you keep adding onto that, like the quintessential stud muffin?
Okay, so well was Paul. I think he thought it was a classic TV and film villainous thing to say. He's big into, like, cartoons, like WB, stuff like that, like Bugs Bunny. There was a T-shirt, of course, this means war. So, and he loved booking for, Taz, who originally was the Tasmaniac that came from the cartoons. So Paul was big into cartoons, pop culture, just TV kind of screenplay kind of tropes. And that's where I think well is inspired by. Quintessential Stud Muffin, I am realizing, consciously or subconsciously, I don't think I've ever asked him. I don't think I've ever heard him say. But if you're patient and follow along with it, Paul managed Austin Idol early in his career.
Sure.
And Austin Idol was the universal heartthrob.
Yep.
And I think Quintessential Stud Muffin is an homage to be the next generation, the advancement of universal heartthrob. So I think that might be why he had a name like that in mind. And then the dance is all me. The dance is all, how can I just go, luscious Johnny Valiant's out there, screaming, parlez-vous, scrambled eggs, grandma, just to, just to make myself somebody you're pumping gas. And how can I make myself that? And it was the dance, because who in their right mind, at the time I was in my early 20s, and what guy trying to get over and be charismatic and be rich and famous and be on TV and strike gold with the ladies, what guy is then going to go ahead and do a little happy tantrum dance? So I figured it was kind of the right thing to do.
It was such a dichotomy too, because if you think about it, your character, which was over so huge and so freaking entertaining, you've got that character, this almost absurd character, and then you got the violence of ECW. So you weren't really comic relief, but it was like your persona kind of fit in with the whole bizarre aspect of ECW.
Yeah, no, that's really well put. My character was extreme. The Dudleys were extreme, but there was no earthly reason for them and I to be linked and to be working together. I was definitely kind of in their world of Dudleyville. I was a fish out of water, and it was definitely an odd couple type of arrangement. And that was great. It was kind of like, why are they hanging out with this guy? Almost like a sub of that, kind of like, why are they hanging out with this guy? He must have money, which in South Philly in the 90s, especially people like, just kind of alternative grunge, like, kill the rich, and kind of like, it was just an awesome heat, you know what I mean? That these guys were just scrappy, products of incest, brothers by violence, and brothers that never knew their father, and the whole 9 yards. And here I come, just leading them. They almost like, especially later on, Bubba would start taking the mic and cutting promos and doing his own business. And that kind of even added another level of heat. Like, they don't even need this guy. Like, this guy's going to start a riot. This guy's here hyping these other guys up. And it's almost like he's stealing a check, because good as he is, maybe he should be with someone else, because it's almost like they don't need.
Oh yeah, makes perfect sense.
In the best way, in a real kind of subliminal, psychological, there's an aspect of that there. I certainly, I think I brought a lot to the table. At the end of the day, in real life, I think we all did our part, and they did, quote unquote, need me. So that is, but just, I think there was a lot of psychology going on with and then I started to get over a lot.
Mhm.
Hear the limericks, and we had to tamp that down. I don't know if one show I don't think I would have slapped somebody's hand like a babyface would. I don't think it was quite that far, but something happened, or I did something to where I came back through the curtain, and Paul pulled me aside, and he said, I just want you to know, as a heel, to me, you're worth $1 million. As a babyface, you're worth me.
Wow.
At the moment. And he basically just told me, think about, almost like, think about that and govern yourself accordingly. Like, he gave me a tap on the, he was like, so that's that, and so, had to deal with, which is strange, because then as time went by and the Dudleys left, I kind of got pushed towards babyface when I got the TNN role. So I tried to do that more as a tweener. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got to be a hard line, because you want to be the bad guy, you want to be the villain and insult people, but at the same time, it's just so creative and so different than what everything else is. You got these fans are conflicting. They want to boo you, but they're so entertained by what you're saying. We can't help but cheer you because we're falling in love with the character.
Yeah, absolutely. At very first, I was kind of legitimately hated. Just again, just kind of just because Philly hates like baby faces, they hate young guys, they hate white meat, and that's what I was. Even at first as a heel, I was kind of I just looked like I presented, as that snot-nosed punk with the silver spoon in his mouth, and so yeah, I mean, there was that, and then again, like I say, by the time the Dudleys are gone and TNN's about to start up, it's almost like I'm another babyface with Joey, and I have to kind of, nip at Joey's heels and be a burden to him, and kind of be a thorn in his side, so I can try to be a tweener, because when I'm starting off, they hate me, and then it got to the point where, in a kind of babyface tweener way, they loved to hate me, and that's tricky to kind of manipulate.
Joel, I'm an old school guy, and listening to you talk about how the fans eventually came around to you, I think your character back in the 60s or 70s or whatever, there wouldn't have been this gravitation to you as a babyface. I mean, you would have been hated. They would have run you, especially in the southern part of the United States or whatever. My God, they would have run you out of town on a rail. So I think the eras have something to do with that. What do you think about the concept that the whole view of wrestling, heels and baby faces and everything, where you're talking Road Warriors or Flair or whoever it was, where all of a sudden the guys that are supposed to be hated and would have been hated 20 years earlier are now all of a sudden they're mainstream, and it's like pop culture.
I think you're right. And I think there's an argument that we started it, right? Because there's some people argue that we were even the kind of inspiration for WWF and the Attitude Era.
Oh, yeah.
I think in ECW, there's a chance that we started it. But, the stars aligned. I mean, number one, we were the first promotion to promote ourselves as being extreme and hardcore. First and foremost, as our bread and butter. Number two, we were based out of Philadelphia. So we were, Memphidelphia. We were, that's, just the geography of wrestling, just Philadelphia kind of, is different than the South in a way, as far as, what they like, what they don't like. And then the 90s, the time, the 90s. So, yeah, I agree with you. And that's an honor to hear you say that maybe in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, that I would have been just kind of a straight up heel, and I would have been kind of, taken as a Jim Cornette was in the South, or as a Bobby Heenan was in the Midwest, or that's great to hear. But, you take it as it comes. It's very interactive. It's very action reaction. You have to listen to the crowd. Whatever you're getting from them, you have to figure out how you're going to give back so that you get, it's a tango, it's a dance. So it takes two, you and the crowd. And all of the heel reaction that I've ever gotten, I'm thankful and blessed and grateful for. I'm humbled. And likewise, for anybody that's ever, uproariously cheered at a limerick, I love that too.
When you guys kind of started traveling a little bit more, and I enjoyed it because, if it was the older ECW, we wouldn't have had a chance to see you guys, but you came, you guys traveled all over the country. When did you guys know that you had a rabid fan base? Because I feel like the ECW fan base, it was almost like cultish. Like it was just a different energy than your WCW or your WWF at the time. Like, when did you guys know you were hitting fans maybe in a different way that the other promotions weren't?
If you ask Paul, he might give an earlier date, because I got there in September of 95. By then, I'm sure by his metrics, he already knew. For me, us getting on pay-per-view is a big deal.
That was the Living Dangerously, right? That was your first show?
Barely Legal.
Barely Legal, that's what it was, okay.
Barely Legal, April of 97. And just bringing pay-per-view trucks and satellite trucks and stuff to the arena, which was a bingo hall, like an old warehouse under a trestle, and just blowing out all of the electricity and transformers on the block, and that mic that didn't work at the start of the show, and I think also gave out the show. We kind of, as a little engine that could, I think that first pay-per-view was a big deal. Running WWF, WCW TV venues for me was a big deal. As a tape trader, as somebody who watched all the TV every week, to then be performed like Cobb County Civic Center and Center Stage, to be performing at the Hara Arena, Mid-Hudson Civic Center, Broome County in Binghamton, Scranton, to be doing all these kind of venues that I had seen and hear about. So to me, they're not just, VFW high school gyms, but they are, looked at one way, they are stepped up VFWs and high school gyms. In the grand scheme of things, they're not, Broadway theaters, they're not Madison Square Garden, but at the same time, it was a big deal. Action figures, I think, are a big deal, and to the similar extent, the magazine, saying action figures than video games. I think video games were a big deal. So, for me, and TNM, to give them a little. So 97, 98, 99 for me. But again, maybe that's because I got there in the second half of 95. If you ask Paul, you may get a similar or you may get a completely different answer. He may have known that he had lightning in a bottle in 93 or 94. I don't know.
Joe, I was going to ask you if you thought or if you think that an ECW reboot or something similar would work today. But then I also think there's 1,000 indie promotions that are doing their best to be ECW. I mean, to the point where they're, on these botch videos of guys, jumping off a 17-foot ladder and landing on the floor instead of the table. Where do you think the ECW influence, let me put it that way, the ECW influence or trademark has morphed into what you see on the independent wrestling scene right now, where everybody and his brother is going through fire or getting hit with a, barbed wire or what have you?
Yeah, I think many of the top indies borrow from ECW, take the best of it and kind of mold it to where they need it and use elements and are inspired by it. And I think that's a great homage to us, and that's a great hat tip, and kind of that's our legacy, and that's great. Should there be another ECW reboot, even if it were done, quote unquote, well? Probably not. I'm a huge fan of Bill Watts' UWF. I'm a huge fan of World Class. I'm a huge fan of Memphis. But, even if it's promoted by the Von Erichs, even if you put it back in the Sportatorium, even if you make certain concessions, do the right things, make it as authentic as possible, just use younger talent, because obviously 40 years has gone by. And if you present something called world-class championship wrestling to me, no matter how close on a scale from 1 to 10, you're able to push the needle to 10 on world-class championship wrestling, I'm always going to be sitting back saying, well, it's good. It's not exactly world-class championship wrestling. It's how can it be, right? None of the guys. You'll never know if these guys would have been booked by World Class if there was a straight, so it's only with respect for ECW and absolutely with no disrespect to ECW. I don't know if a reboot would be the right way to honor it.
Yeah. What I enjoyed too about ECW is me being a young college kid. I was also born in 75, so we're the same age. I assumed that I was the target demographic at that time, a young man in my, early to mid 20s. What ECW did, I felt like it was unique because they could do things just in terms of like the presentation with the shaky cameras and the weird camera angles, like everything. You could do things a little bit more. But I remember going to an ECW show, my girlfriend, a few buddies of mine, and at the end of the show, Tajiri was up on a turnbuckle and he was looking at my girlfriend and he was doing this and she's like, no. And we're like, yeah, show your tit. And she's like, no. And finally he gave her the finger and we were all like, yay. So we were like hearing the fact that Tajiri was asking this girl to pull up her shirt. And I say that because like at that moment in time, you could do it and the whole arena just, everybody got into it. But in today's day and age, like, to me, it wouldn't be the same because I feel like you've got societal norms that you couldn't push like you could back in then.
100%. And that's true for ECW. And that's true for pro wrestling. And it's true for pop culture and life. It goes from micro to macro. It's every aspect of life. What you just put out there is absolutely true. All in the Family was the #1 show on television in the early 70s on CBS. All in the Family would be laughed at, ripped up, and the opposite of green lit if it were brought into a studio today to be looked at. It would never make air. So, 100%. I agree with you.
Back to the reboot question, and I think this goes to something that Chris said a little bit earlier about the excitement for ECW as opposed to what you were seeing for WWF or WCW. I mean, it was so night and day. I mean, it wasn't even close. I don't think you can talk about an excitement especially in the latter day WCW and compare it to the fan reaction and the atmosphere in ECW. I think this is just worlds apart. I think ECW stood by itself, still stands by itself, all alone with everything. Having said that, and I talked about the ECW reboot. To me, what you're seeing on the indies now, Joel, is gratuitous violence that means nothing. I mean, a promoter will go into a high school gym, having never been there before. He has no TV, and he's bringing out 162-pound guys, hitting each other with kendo sticks and light bulbs for no reason whatsoever. Nobody knows who the hell these guys are. ECW, you had the violence, but it meant something. There was interaction. There was feuds. There was, whatever hatred, whatever animosity was presented. You really believed in ECW that these guys hated each other. Now it's just like you're watching a couple of high school kids fighting on a street corner.
Yeah. What's funny is the indies that are kind of at the top of the food chain right now.
Yeah.
Especially the ones that would kind of be tapped as being, closest to the ECW of now. They're actually presenting that, they're actually creative and episodic, and there's a reason why they're at the top of the food chain. It's kind of like you said, these kind of one-off, kind of fly-by-night, kind of, I can promote wrestling, smaller indies that like you say, it's just guys being unwise about their moveset, guys violence for the sake of violence, guys not reading the room and not realizing that, all these little kids that are there with their parents, don't need or want a certain content. Yeah, totally. I understand exactly what you're saying.
Joel, there's one infamous event where all of the folding chairs came flying into the ring and you got talent being buried. There was a level of violence in ECW that was never seen before, dare I say, even since. Was there any event or a time that you actually feared for your personal safety at an event?
I've been asked that, and I think the answer that I usually give, I think really is, people change as time goes by and you think of things differently. But even the harder I think about it, I think my regular answer to that is the same. No. And I don't know if that's a function of I was too young to almost young and dumb in a sense to that I thought I was immortal, impervious to pain, like all people in their early 20s do. I don't know if there was some of that involved. I don't know if there was some of where ECW, nobody can hurt us. I don't know if there was some of I've got Big Dick Dudley and Bubba and Devon here, so nobody can hurt us. I don't know if there was some of we've got Atlas security here, so nobody can hurt us. But I probably should have felt that way. There were definitely riots and near riots that we were part of. But no, I think I was too living on cloud nine about it to really feel vulnerable.
Wow. That's it. And again, Joel, I think part of it, even with the riots, I think part of it has to do with the eras, because again, back in the 60s and the 70s, you had wrestlers getting knifed and shot at and everything else because, in a sense, and I'm not denigrating ECW because the fans were certainly into it, but there had to be, and probably because Vince broke kayfabe eons ago, they're probably in the back of the fans' minds is, hey, it's a riot, but it's a fun riot. We got to be a part of this, as opposed to wanting to put a bullet in Bobby Heenan's head at the Chicago Amphitheater back in the 70s.
We ran Alabama for a 4-shot.
Oh.
I promise you, after the opening match, I forget if FBI was involved or who, but after the opening match, somebody came back to the back near Gorilla, and they were telling the second match who was about to go through. They said, be careful, because there's this old lady in the front row, and she's trying to shank people.
Huh.
So even in the late 90s, we had we had guys try to start fights, and we had thankfully no shootings, no stabbings. Thankfully, it definitely wasn't as prevalent as it was in the 60s and 70s. And like you say, a lot of that is because kayfabe had been broken, and people realized, even though it was extreme hardcore and violent, it was still a show.
Yeah.
That nobody wanted you to suffer, and nobody wanted your family to not move forward in life, and all of the things that managers say to the fans to get their ire going and get their dander up. I think people realize that heels had to be heels because that was their job, to be heels, instead of just being vile, reprehensible subhuman garbage.
I love that reference.
Yeah, and I mean, like when you mentioned wanting to be part of it, like we wanted to be part of the party that was ECW. Like that was why we would travel to shows, because we wanted to be part of that atmosphere. We knew that it was going to be a good time, because ECW was like it was like a smorgasbord, right? It was like a buffet. There's something for everybody. You had the hardcore, you had the funny, you had the lucha, you had the like you had something for everybody if you were a fan, and that's what we love.
That at a certain press conference or at a certain appearance or whatever, I've seen Paul himself be asked, what makes ECW so special, and rather than just relying on the hardcore, relying on blood, relying on this, relying on that, he absolutely just said what you did, that his intent was always, when you buy a ticket and you experience an event, he wanted you almost to be going to like a wrestling restaurant and get a 9-course meal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. This is just an aside, and it has nothing to do with anything, which is typically my podcast style. but being an old school fan, um, Dawn Lemke, one of the wrestlers who wrestled for Vern in the 70s, told me about a riot that she witnessed firsthand in one of the cities back in the 70s. And it was a full-scale riot. And people are throwing things in the ring. They're getting into the ring. Well, Kay Noble, one of the old-time lady wrestlers, got in the ring. Kay leaves the locker room, and she's just charging down the aisle, and she's in there throwing haymakers at everybody, anything that'll move. She was absolutely fearless. The one guy who got the hell out of Dodge was Ox Baker. He looked around, this 320-pound monster, looks around, and I've seen video of Ox in some other riots. Maybe he was just had PTSD. But here, Kay Noble, lady wrestler, is throwing punches, uppercuts, and hooks and everything else, and Ox Baker is covering his head and walking to the locker room. So just the kind of shit that goes into my head once in a while.
That's great.
Great stuff. Chris, we want to do a little name association here before we close her out. Put up whoever you want, Chris, and get Joel's 1 or 2 sentences, memories, whatever. But save Paul for last, because I want to talk about Paul a little bit. Wherever you are.
I'm here. Just
okay. Yeah, you go ahead and you pick and
choose. Here we go. There's the first one.
The franchise. Yeah, man, the dean, the teacher, the educator. Big influence. Always took the time to talk to me. Just really great presence, great heel, a great talker, man. Loves to talk. Even outside of the ring, just if you ask him a question that you want a 2-minute answer to, you'll get a 10-minute answer. Just very thoughtful, very verbose in the best way, thoughtful. Just hell of a guy. Shane's awesome.
Wow. Okay. Next, this guy here,
the heart and soul of ECW. That's a shoot too. Man, Tommy's there's a reason why Tommy's welcome in every locker room. There's a reason why Tommy is an ambassador. There's a reason why Tommy was talent relations. Just a really, really good guy. Gave his all. Just really a soldier in the ECW army. Just really a major piece on the chessboard, and really was able to take his run in ECW and build an awesome career.
Would you then say that with the Sabus and the Sandmans and everything else, that Tommy Dreamer, if you had to say the face of ECW as a wrestling talent, would it be Tommy Dreamer?
Huge asset. Yeah. ECW would have been different without Tommy. Tommy and Raven, huge episodic storyline that kept people coming up, tickets, watching TV. Yeah. Just pivotal, really pivotal, especially when you think about backstage too, creative and administrative, and just really little engine that could really kept it going. And yeah, man, Tommy was very, very pivotal and very, very instrumental for ECW.
There we go.
The Dudleys were a great team to work with. I'm glad I was paired with them. We had the kind of dynamic where, again, I was super young. So were they, but I was even younger than they were. And we had the dynamic where it was kind of good cop, bad cop. And Bubba was the bad cop and Devon was the good cop. So Bubba was kind of authoritarian, maybe is the best word. But both those guys really, really knew where their bread was buttered and really, really loved CW for being a venue for them and the promotion that gave them their chance and gave them their break. And they went on to such great things. Went to WWE, internationally, TNA, this, that, and the other, over 20 tag team championships. Dudleys were great.
Yeah. Bring up the next one there, Chris. There you go.
Rob. Yeah, probably the most relaxed member of the ECW locker room. He's a really good guy. Just a guy that never complained, had no reason to complain, so never did. Just a guy that could have gotten over anywhere, and proved that later on. Just the kind of guy that, depending on the time, Rob Van Dam needed ECW and ECW needed Rob Van Dam. It was kind of, it was symbiotic. It was kind of codependent. It was kind of, just that kind of, did WWF make Hogan or did Hulk Hogan make WWF? You kind of, that comes to mind for me for Rob and ECW, because like I say, if he wanted to WWF, WWE earlier, he could have, but at the same time, his gimmick was best presented for quite a while by ECW, and I think ECW was very thankful to have him on the roster as well. So just a great guy.
Talk about a guy who's a regular presence on the convention circuit.
Yeah.
Quick question about this guy here. Obviously, we lost him way too early. I had an opportunity to work with him a couple of times, on some indie shows, but one of the toughest SOBs. I mean, I can't imagine what this guy went through in his life, let alone in his career.
Yeah. Sabu was a man's man. Sabu was a straight shooter. Sabu was the most territory guy in a way. The most, because we had, we had One Man Gang, we had Tommy Rogers, but Sabu, for as young as he was relatively, compared to some of the legends that we had in with us, he really was, mindset-wise, a territory guy. Probably, obviously, because he was the Sheik's nephew.
Yeah.
But what a straight shooter! What a gentleman! Didn't hold back. At the same time, very jovial, very lighthearted. You could only think what kind of tremendous pain that he walked around, physically wise, every day, and still was just a really, really guy to be around and to work with.
This guy right here, this will be our grand finale, the fireworks display here. A lot has been said about Paul Heyman, good, bad, ugly, beautiful, whatever. My only opportunity, and by the way, I'm still waiting for Paul's phone call from 1992 or 93 when he told me I was going to be the guy, broadcasting ECW. I'll stay by the phone. But at any rate, I worked with Paul in the AWA in 87, and I just remember his frustration because he would come in from the production meeting or the pre-show meeting, and he would be so frustrated because nobody was listening to his ideas. Greg and Vern wanted to do their own thing. Paul had all these ideas that obviously would have been had a little more edge to them. But even then, you could see the wheels turning in this guy, but I would never have imagined that he would be the influence that he is in the business today.
Yeah, he got the keys, man. He got the keys in Philadelphia in the 90s. He was able to not have to be frustrated because everything did. He was the executive producer. He's the first, I think he's the first person really wrestling out of all the territories, if you can count us kind of as a last territory. He's kind of the first person to want to get over and be recognized as an executive producer. He was the mad scientist and just a genius, just a creative genius. Obviously, without him, there's absolutely no ECW. ECW was his baby. It was his brainchild. It became extreme instead of Eastern, on his walk. For me, a mentor, just there's no Quintessential Stud Muffin without him. Just absolutely gave me my break. He gave me great advice. He gave me opportunity, and I'll forever be thankful.
He's still magic today. Almost 40 years later, the guy's still doing it. I wanted to finish up with Paul, but now I got to talk about you, and we all do, because I'm telling you, you are one of the unsung, if I hate that expression, one of the unsung real legends of the modern era in professional wrestling. People, you had your niche in ECW, but damn it, you are such a talented guy. And I was going back looking at some of your promos, and honest to God, it takes a lot for me to belly laugh when I'm watching old wrestling stuff. But you, man, you did it, you nailed it, and you're a hell of a guy. And it was our honor to have you on the show, pal. I'm telling you.
I appreciate the invite. You guys are great. Hell of a show that you guys put on. I'm thankful to be with you guys. And I really thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you, Joe. I know that, yeah, again, for me, and I cannot say this enough, the influence and all of the memories that ECW gave to me, and you being a big part of that, absolutely. I can go down a Joe Gertner rabbit hole on YouTube, and I can just have the best time. So thank you for bringing the Quintessential Stud Muffin to the fans at that point, because I am very, very grateful for you. And I will always be a fan of yours, and after having talked to you, the person as well, Joel. So thank you very much. Like, my hat's off to you, my friend.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Class act, buddy. Take care of yourself. Happy New Year.
Thank you. Happy New Year.
See you later.
There he is. What I loved about Joel is you've got the character, but then you get the real Joel Gertner. Because when I think of Joel Gertner, it's over the top. It's the little obscene. It's a little dirty. It's a little edgy. Like, that's the gimmick. But when you hear the story, like, the best guys that usually make the best heels.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's a perfect example. Like, you can just tell he's genuine. And that's one thing that with this podcast we always like to do. It's just being genuine. It's being real, and it's being authentic. And, this, I know it's not AWA related, but I think when you hear about how you can process and you can, have those remnants to the old school and how he thinks about his character and putting it all together, it's got that old school mentality. And I didn't know that much about Joel. So my respect for him just went up.
Whenever we get somebody on the air, and I'm showing my age and the old school mentality, but anybody who talks about tape trading and how they came up through the business and that kind of thing, I mean, that really warms my heart, because I get it. I understand, being the fan, being the tape trader, being the correspondent. He mentioned, some people that I used to correspond with that were wrestling journalists. I really, really enjoyed that interview. And I agree with you, Chris. Genuine guy. Very intelligent guy. I was surprised and pleased at his knowledge of wrestling history. This is not some fly-by-night guy. He knows what he was talking about and is talking about. And this is a good one. I'm glad we finally got the Quintessential Stud Muffin on the podcast.
Yeah, I know our audience is older, but for anyone that is on the younger side that has aspirations of getting into the business, what I took away from what Joel said is he looked at the tapes of Jim Cornette, of Bobby Heenan, of all of the old legends. Don't forget about the past. Respect the past. Learn from it.
He studied it.
Exactly. And why wouldn't you look at what has worked in the past and then give it your own little spin, add your own little spice to the movie? And that's what Joel did, and he did it well.
You know, guys, before we wrap up here, along these same lines, I think of guys like Jim Cornette, Eddie Gilbert, Paul Heyman. These guys all started out as wrestling journalists and photographers and what have you, with a genuine love for the business. That's how they got in. They really love the wrestling business, and they're respectful of the wrestling business. And, when we can get somebody like a Joel Gertner on our show, AWA related or not, although we'll throw Jerry Lynn in there, because, Jerry worked for the AWA and then ECW champ for a while. Just a great interview. I really look forward to conversing with Joel down the road. What a guy.
Yeah. So thank you, Mick, for setting it up. And again, this is just kind of an added bonus. The end of 2025 didn't end well for a lot of us. So this was something to kind of feel good and cleanse the palate and maybe set the tone going into 2026. So thank you guys for doing this. And again, yeah, not traditionally an AWA, but I think if you hear the respect to the old school, you said, Joe, and you mentioned perfectly when he was talking about studying the tapes, and you can tell the respect, and it's not somebody who's just in it for the fame and then he gets out. Like there's a real genuine love for the territories, and that's what I enjoy and respect. So thank you.
And I'm speaking for all of us, and I'm sure you each want to do your own thing here, but thank you to everybody that's been along for the ride in 2025. In a lot of ways, the outside world sucked in 2025 on many, many levels. And if we could provide just that 1 hour, 2 hours a week, just get your mind off of it. Listen to these three grown-up teenagers BSing about wrestling. Then we've done our job. And I want to wish everybody a happy new year. I hope it's a better 2026 for all of us.
Yeah, I would love to say, Chris, to the quintessential podcast producer, to Slick Mick, the quintessential muffin top. I wish you all a happy new year.
What am I, a lemon poppy seed or what?
At best.